The very things that we've been taught to think are satanic or evil or dangerous or bad for us, what if some of those are actually the way that we plug ourselves directly into the divine?
We could have been taking LSD every Sunday and having God unity consciousness experiences with High Priestesses? How did we fuck this up so bad?
So bad.
So when I find out there's a cave of Pan, I was like, we gotta go.
I didn't know cave until I saw this cave.
And then I asked you if you wanted to sit in Yab Yum.
And it feels so profound, the ability to experience an energy cock.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of This Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed. And I want you to have your own magical journey in your own way that takes you from wherever you are now to the most outrageous and true and beautiful expression of sex, love, and relationships that is available to you. I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the number one way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. I'm Layla Martin, and welcome to This Tantric Life. This is an incredibly special episode where me and Emily Fletcher, my best friend and one of the most incredible spiritual teachers of our time, are going to take you on our journey through Greece, where we not only visited the High Priestess sacred sites, but took plant medicine, as our ancestors did, to activate and awaken the deep and powerful transmissions of these sacred locations. We're going to share with you what we remembered and realized at these sites. So this is actually episode 2 of a 4-part series. And if you want to catch episode 1, where we drop into questions like, what is a high priestess and the power of plant medicine, and me and Emily's journey to Eleusis, you can find that over on Emily's podcast called Why Isn't Everyone Doing This? So in this episode, we're going to take you through Delphi, which is where the oracle would channel sacred wisdom of the divine through her life force energy and actually chart the course of history by being an advisor to military leaders and kings of the Greek Empire. We're also going to take you into Pan's cave. So I'm going to share with you all about Pan, why he's such a sacred deity to me in my life, and our lovemaking experience of Eros activation that was absolutely life-changing. This is a moment for both of us to claim this kind of sexual experience with so much love, compassion, and pride, and take you into the depth of our erotic union and what that births into our lives, into our bodies, and into all of reality as high priestesses. So we're going to start at Delphi, this location of the oracle, who was called the Pythia, right, for Python, which is really the activation of her life force energy, which in our tradition, Tantric and Vedic traditions, is Kundalini, right? The activation of sacred Shakti power, which allowed her to channel the voice of the divine within her. So, Emily, going to Delphi and exploring this oracle nature, this history of the oracle, what did that mean to you in your life and in your relationship to this channel?
So it's been in the past few years that people have started to reflect back to me like, oh, Emily, you're such a channel. Like, whoa, you were really channeling. Or like, I felt so many lifetimes moving through you. And so it's it's more of been an external reflection back versus an internal experience, which I think makes sense because in order to really be an oracle or a channel, you have to disappear to some degree. So it's something that I feel in great humility towards and dare I even say proud of, because of the 16 years of twice a day meditation that I've engaged in that has allowed me to see that I am not just my individuality. I am not just Emily Fletcher. Yes, that individuality is real, but that's one wave connected to the ocean of totality. And when you swim in that simultaneity for long enough, then when there is a need of the time, when someone asks a question, when nature wants to use you as a vessel, your bandwidth has been substantiated so that you can be of service to the question that is being asked. And so it feels like something that I do when I'm teaching. It feels like something that happens when I'm on stage. Like the best performers, the best athletes, the best teachers are really being vessels. They are being channels. And so it's something that I feel just excited to develop more of. And it's one of the reasons I was so excited for us to go to Delphi, where this has been happening for thousands of years and not like in the shadows, right? That a whole stadium, that a whole theater, that a whole temple was built to celebrate this. And like you said, kings and leaders coming to drink from the well of cosmic intelligence.
And what it looked like for a whole society, a society that birthed science, the scientific method, research, philosophy, democracy, these high arts, they looked to feminine channeled wisdom to direct the whole of empires rather than fearing it. And that we can be in reverence to feminine spirituality and feminine wisdom and what that can do to a society's creativity and power.
Yes. And then I think on top of it, and in connection with our episode 1, is that these oracles were actually dancing with altered states of consciousness. And we can talk about the science of this, that there was some sort of vapors or chemicals that were coming up from the water at this specific sacred site in the mountains of Greece that would change their state of consciousness and allow them to access even more expanded knowledge. So I think that 1, honoring feminine wisdom, and 2, starting to celebrate and take away the shame from altering your state of consciousness in an intentional way. Like both of those feel like really important medicine for society right now. So I'm really curious how you originally discovered your oracular powers, because I know they've been around for a while and I've seen you channel. I've seen all of the tantric enlightened masters channeling through you when you are facilitating. So I'm curious how you first came to this.
It was one of the first gifts that I found when I was a teenager. So we had this witchcraft store next to my high school, and there was a tarot card reader at the Mercury Cafe in downtown Denver. And I would get my friend to drive me there because I wasn't old enough yet to drive. And the power of a tarot card reading, like I felt so seen, and there was so much magic, and it was so exciting, and it was so accurate. And so I got into tarot card reading, and I actually was a professional tarot card reader for 2 whole years. People would be in tears, and it's because I could see their souls. I was reading the cards, but mostly I was reading them. I was reading the moment. People felt so seen. Something that was so healing about that is when I was younger, I felt like I could see people and it scared them. And when I became a tarot card reader, it was like they paid me to see them. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, my seeing can be a gift. Like the clarity of my seeing can be a gift. When I was a teenager, I got cast in this play where I was an oracle. And I realized that like in the acting of it, like I knew how to be a channel. I knew how to be an oracle. And early on in my spirituality, one of my teachers, Sarita, she was like, you're an oracle, right? Like cultivate that. So I actually realized sometimes on plant medicine journeys, sometimes sober, just in breathwork practices, that with consent, I could actually jump out of my body, merge with another person's soul, and speak the truth of their soul. And I don't think that anyone knows the future for sure, but what you can do is you can read the present with so much accuracy that gives you insight into the future and where things are headed. And so it's this ability to like see so clearly what is and the power of that channel, to me, that is the oracle. And those powers do activate and sharpen with the awakening of Kundalini energy.
One of my favorite quotes from the Vedas is that the present moment is the future in the making. So the more present you are right now, the more you can see the future as it is unfolding. Versus if we're not conscious, if we're not awake, if we are barely even in this moment, how on earth could you even predict the future or see the future as it's unfolding? And also the higher consciousness seeds we plant in the present moment, we are then going to reap a higher quality future.
Yeah. So let's take you all to that day, right? And here's the thing. We're here on this epic journey. We're here to do drugs, plant medicine, psychedelics, right? And also just to be in the high priestess mode of working with the energy, consciousness, and power of plants, like our forerunners did in every human society on earth. It was celebrated in these high priestess traditions to use plant medicine sacraments to see things as they are, right? So we're on the sacred journey. We're in our hotel in Athens, and we're both having the shittiest day ever. The shittiest day ever. Like, we have these goddess dresses. We can be glorious. And you are so sick.
Yeah. My son has been sick. The fires were outrageous in New York City. I was breathing so much smoke for weeks. I got a cold that turned into like full-blown bronchitis. I'm coughing up mucus. My nose is running. I'm PMSing. My back is hurting. Like, I was not feeling very goddessy at all. I was feeling extraordinarily human and vulnerable. And
yeah. And I was in a real story with my boyfriend, like part of my journey and part of what was up for me at Eleusis was the ways in which I was still not in full ownership of my own beauty and body, and feeling the pain of that I could still shrink from being photographed, that I could still shrink from being so in the expression of myself, right? And you were a Broadway theater, literal showgirl, right? You were a beauty queen. And that doesn't mean that you own your beauty, but you have this ownership of how you inhabit your body, of your level of beauty. And I was in this real story of like, this is still a core wound for me after so many years. And it's clear now in hindsight that I needed to go to the depth of the sorrow and heal it. But I was in this projectionary state with my boyfriend where I was just writing these like bitchy, fiery text messages, which I don't usually do. Like, I usually communicate from a grounded, loving, seeing, compassionate space. And I was in a real fuck you moment, like just firing off those text messages and like, let's go to Delphi, right? And I was like, I don't care if we break up. And like, there was pain underneath it. I was struggling. So I was really in my own experience. You were in your own experience. And we're like, let's go to Delphi.
all right, let's do this. Because it's not, I think that's an important distinction that people think that, oh, if I do plant medicine or if I do psychedelics, because so many people do approach medicine to numb, to avoid, to look away from, because, you know, alcohol actually kills the neurons in the brain. It makes us less conscious. And it's one of the most widely done drugs on the planet. Or we take painkillers because we are in pain. So most people's relationship with substances is about numbing or looking away from the pain. But something to note that is different is that when you do psilocybin or LSD or these like psychotropic chemicals, more of the brain lights up, right? It's not less. If you look at a brain on meditation and you look at a brain on psilocybin or LSD, they look very similar because more of the quadrants are lighting up and talking to each other, which that's what creativity looks like on a brain scan, is that the whole brain lights up. So if you're feeling anything, pain, shame, sickness, when you get into a heightened state of consciousness, there is no numbing, there is no avoiding, there's actually acceptance, facing, feeling it, moving through. And one of the things that I really like that we highlighted in episode 1, one of the things that we both went through in Eleusis was dying before we die, like going through a bit of a death portal so that we see that it doesn't have to be so scary. But actually, I think that our real sort of like death portal and integration happened in Delphi because we were just in a darker place.
Yes. And what you're talking about with the studies on psychedelics, right? Your brain starts talking to itself, like parts of your brain, they can see these in studies that were disconnected actually form connections when you're taking psychedelics, and those connections remain.
Yes.
So more of your brain is talking to itself, and it's actually the separation of parts of the brain that creates disintegration and perpetuates trauma in the nervous system. So this deep integration is powerful. And we cover this in the Eleusis episode, but one of the great revelations from this book, The Immortality Key, right, written by Brian Marescu, is that the high priestesses of Europe and early Christianity, so both the pagan traditions and early Christianity, were serving plant medicine sacraments, and likely LSD, maybe magic mushrooms, probably both, honestly, and that there was a real intentionality in the serving of plant medicine and the use of sacred sexuality practices through goddess worship to give people tools to be able to remember themselves as divine. And there was a long-standing, intentional campaign from the Catholic Church to deny people plant medicine, to deny women spiritual leadership and authority, and to really remove all forms and tools that gave people access to divine remembrance on threat of death and torture.
And sometimes death.
Actual death, yes. Actual witch burning, as we discuss in episode 1. And what that's done to our nervous systems, what that's done to our psyches. And that original campaign, which wasn't about Christianity, that wasn't about the love of Jesus, the saving power of the Holy Spirit, the ability to die and be reborn inside of ourselves, the ability to be forgiven, the ability to find endless compassion. That was a targeted campaign to remove people's ability to remember their own divine nature outside of the very toxic religious teachings of the Catholic Church, which said you have a right to access God if you agree that your body is dirty, if you agree that sex is unholy outside of marriage and still probably pretty dirty, and if you never take plant medicine, right? And so these
if you don't engage in homosexual activity, or if you are not homosexual, which I think is germane to today's episode.
Exactly. And so the reclamation of this isn't just hedonism, although I think there's something in these pagan roots of like, celebrate life. Come on, like enjoy
temporary.
it while you're here, you know? Why take it so seriously? Like get your work done, move through the trauma. Yes, life can be painful. And you know what? Have the best time ever while you're here. So there's that element of yes to hedonism and the reclamation of sacred sexuality, of pussy, of the divinity of our bodies, and yes, of taking plant medicine sacraments to remember our own divinity is so essential to the remembrance of our own power, to the remembrance of our spiritual sovereignty. So you and I going to these sites is like, it's so potent, and I want everyone to have access to these practices. That's why I've been teaching this for 20 years, because it's like, yes, let's have better sex. Yes, let's have better relationships. But you know what's alienating us from ourselves, from our children, from our own bodies, from our own magic, is this long-standing toxic campaign that taught us to fear every single route to divine remembrance in ourselves outside of strict doctrinal teachings that had a real agenda around how to control people in the name of God rather than how to awaken people in the name of love.
I'm here to reveal one of the most ancient secrets of Tantric methodology, which is the shorter the cup, but the longer the gold spoon, the more the pleasure. This is sex magic. This comes from the supplement company Mood that I created. These are sexy supplements. They are plant-activated formulations vetted by our all-female research team for efficacy, and they allow you to enhance the amount of pleasure and sensitivity you feel in your body. So sex magic is to be taken as a ritual before making love, before doing sex magic, before self-pleasuring, and it will enhance your sensitivity, will enliven your body. It kind of makes me feel like sparkly and a little bit glittery. It has vasodilation properties, which means you have more blood, which means you're going to feel more. feel more alive, feel more awake. And you know what? Real important, it tastes good. So that really beautiful purple color comes from blueberries. It's sweetened with monk fruit. So it's got no like artificial sweeteners in it, no sugar in it. And it's really damn good. So you can find it by heading on over shopmood.com. That's shopmood.com. Finding sex magic. And if this is something you want to use to light up your sex life, please join me because it brings so much more pleasure and delight to living an erotically charged life.
And what's shocking to me is that I had no idea. Like before you came up with this idea of us taking this pilgrimage, before I read The Immortality Key, I didn't know there was a paleo Christianity. I did not know that women were serving medicine and that much of Western civilization as we know it was born out of that. I had no idea that there were actually temples and stadiums erected around not just feminine wisdom, but also the direct experience of the divine that every single human can have when they dance with this medicine that is from the earth.
Yeah.
And it is so liberating. It is so sovereignty inducing that it makes sense. Like, of course you would want to control that. Of course, like if you're trying to control a group of people, it's very hard to do that if they remember that they are God pretending to be human.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get it why we got divorced from these tools. And yet I'm so excited to dream into the ripple effect of this journey, of this podcast, of however many tens of thousands, hopefully hundreds of thousands of people who will hear this, that get to remember for themselves, like, oh, right. No one can keep me from the earth. No one can keep me from a plant. No one can keep me from the chemicals that God actually installed in my body that I managed to let someone else make me hate myself for it. No one can take that from us without actually our consent.
Yeah.
So it's been a very many thousands of years long, very deliberate campaign to make us hate these elements of ourselves or think that plant medicine is dangerous. Now, I think it is, good medicine, good measure to just acknowledge, yes, addiction. Yes, most people need a guide or some sort of set and setting. You need intention. You need integration on the other side. Like I'm not suggesting that anyone just go drink a cup of ayahuasca with no guidance, but that's what these priestesses were doing. They were creating ritual and community and ceremony and integration and letting it be a full initiation.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I think is so exciting. And it's been such a big part of both of our dharmas is initiating people into these lineages to help them to remember.
Yeah. And to really make a distinction between, entheogens and psychedelics, which bring light to the mind, which bring spiritual power back to you, right? And that those often don't come with addictive issues and problems. People don't have addiction problems with LSD. People don't have addiction problems with magic mushrooms and ayahuasca. Is it important to take it, exactly as you're saying, in a structured way, especially if you're a newbie? Is it important to have a skilled practitioner to guide you in it? Yes. And part of this journey is realizing that plant medicine existed in every single society on earth, but it was specifically eviscerated very early from the European traditions. And then what happened was because this war on drugs started in Europe, denying the plant medicine sacraments from high priestesses, witches, and part of the witch burning, and Brian really outlines this well in The Immortality Key, part of the campaign against witches was to keep plant medicine out of the hands of people so that people would not have access to mystical truth, that they themselves are Christ consciousness, that they themselves are the Holy Spirit, that they themselves are divine. And one of the things that touched me so deeply in that book was that they targeted older women specifically because they held the recipes and they passed that magic and that wisdom on to the younger women, the younger witches. And so even ageism and this making of older women invisible, desexualizing them is part of that targeted
Calling
campaign.
them dog-faced.
Yes.
Dehumanizing them.
Making witches scary. They eat babies in the woods,
They turn into cats and suck bloods of babies and are stewing frogs, which the frog part might be true. We can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. And the very real heartbreak of that. And one of the things that I realized is back in the day when birth control would have been a real issue, right? Postmenopausal women would have been some of the most amazing sacred sexuality high priestesses because they could have sex without pregnancy. They could channel their eros with incredible power. They would remember all of the wisdom codes and be able to transmit it. So embracing aging and wisdom and mature women is part of the reclamation of what has been taken from us for so long, right? And we can think like, oh, let's have drugs and sex and all of that. What's happened is even the idea that that is lower than, that that's just some sort of party trick, is to not understand what a sacrament is, that you can take plant medicine and remember yourself as divine, that you can have a sacred sexuality ritual and remember yourself as the goddess, and that spirituality was made to be fun. Yes. That you could have a spiritual party on this earth, and why not before you die?
I mean, I will say we are world-class at spiritual partying.
We sure are.
So I would love if you would define sacrament, and specifically like the Eucharist. Is that what it's called? Eucharist?
Yeah.
Of like where you're eating the body of Christ, drinking the blood of Christ, what we've all seen in church.
Yeah.
Because that's such a big part of the immortality key, was that became the blasphemous part, that actually ingesting these plant medicines that were giving you a direct visceral experience of your own divinity, which is like having sex versus talking about sex.
Yeah.
Like that's the delineation between, oh, I'm taking plant medicine, experiencing it, versus I'm eating a wafer and drinking grape juice, where it's a symbol of versus an experience of.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. So a sacrament is to take something that has been blessed, and it's like you become the blessing energy, you become the spiritual energy, right? And so in the immortality key, what gets articulated so beautifully is that the original Eucharist, taking the blood and body of Christ, you were actually taking a plant medicine. You were taking LSD. You were taking magic mushrooms. So rather than, let's say, sitting in church on a Sunday, as you and I both did when we were children, and being told by a celibate man what God is, God the Father, right? And God is this, and God is that, and God wants you like this, and God needs you to behave like that. And my mother not being able to even take the Eucharist as a Catholic because she dared divorce her pedophile, abusive husband, right?
Wait, what? Because you were divorced? She was divorced, so she couldn't take it?
No. Yeah.
Whoa.
So she wouldn't be able to get into heaven, right? And in my childhood tradition of Catholicism.
Me neither. I'm divorced.
And I remember watching that and just being like, oh, wow.
So just quick side note, and I want to come right back to this. I grew up Southern Baptist in Tallahassee, Florida, just sweaty white men in khaki suits yelling at me and telling me what I should and shouldn't do with my body.
Yeah.
And even at a very young age, I was like, that is not it.
Yeah.
Like, this is not it for me.
Yeah.
And at 5 years old, I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, how do we know we're Baptist? She was like, what? I was like, how do we know we're Baptist? I was like, were we born Baptist? Do we choose to be Baptist? She's like, what? 5-year-old child? I was like, because your best friend is Buddhist, right? And so she's not accepted Jesus Christ as her Lord and Savior. So this guy just said she's going to burn in hell? Like, I could not understand how that was holy or Christ-like, even at 5 years old. And so I asked my mom, I was like, can I maybe try some other stuff? And to her credit, she let me go. I mean, it wasn't a big selection in Tallahassee, Florida, but she let me go to the Jewish temple. She let me go to the Church of Latter-day Saints, to the other flavors of Christianity. I got to go to a Catholic church. And so at least what I'm so grateful for is that even at a young age, I was able to develop this construct that God is a disco ball. Right? And then we're all actually looking at the same thing. Yeah. And you might see green and I might see red. And, we've had the good fortune of seeing God through these physical practices. And someone else might truly find God in church through Jesus. And all of it is beautiful. And so anything to me that helps us to remember the unity of it, I am for.
Yeah.
Anything that wants to take away someone else's experience of their own sovereignty, their own divinity, I cannot stand for that.
Yeah. And that is the primary articulated difference, right? Of what it is to want someone to wake up to truth for their own benefit, for their own power, for their own sovereignty, and wanting people to understand truth in such a way that they give you money and power. right? And that's where the institution comes in and diverts the original spiritual truth. And so in the immortality key, Brian really articulates how in the Greek Empire, right? And I keep saying Greek Empire, but really it's a collection of city-states, right? And in the European pagan traditions, there were these wise women, witches, right? High priestesses who would give plant medicine sacraments so people could wake up to their divine nature. And so early Christianity, one of the reasons it spread all over Europe, right? Like, have you ever wondered, like, how did some, religion of this guy who got killed by the Roman Empire, like, spread all through Europe and have 1 billion followers? Well, originally, they said, you don't have to just go to Eleusis once a year and get a plant sacrament once in a lifetime or once a year. You can do it every Sunday. You can remember God every Sunday, maybe every day if you want to. Like, you can have that intimate of a relationship with God. And it was actually female leadership in the early church that would give people this plant medicine so that they could taste Holy Spirit for themselves. That was the early Eucharist. And I remember when I first heard this, I was at a dinner with my friends who were telling me about this, and I was like, wait, we could have been taking LSD every Sunday and having God unity consciousness experiences with high priestesses? How did we fuck this up so bad?
So bad.
So bad. And I'm making light of it, but how many people afraid of their bodies? How many witches burned? And then what happened was they didn't just leave it, to fucking torture European pagans and threaten Europeans with death should they remember their own pathways to God. They made the society so toxic that Europeans went, Maya and your ancestors went and tried to fuck up the whole world, right? Because they were so disconnected and they had forgotten, and they made plant medicine so wrong that they then went and tried to end the indigenous traditions, to take away plant medicine from them. They broke the hearts of so many people around the world by not just being satisfied with destroying the sovereign connection and divine power of their own people. They went and made it a global campaign.
When I first landed on the sabbatical, we both went to Portugal before this, and I ran into my dear friend Ryan, and on his flight to Portugal, he was delayed 5 hours, and he got sat next to an 81-year-old woman, and they started talking, and he said, I'd love to hear about your life. What are you doing? And she said, well, I'm a missionary. I'm a Catholic missionary. Now, Ryan is Jewish and gay and a spiritual teacher and has been for 13 years. And so he started asking questions and trying to open his heart and be curious. And so he said, what's your, why do you do this? What do you love about this? And she was telling him, and then she really got to the core of why she did this. And one thing I want to highlight is that I don't think anyone goes out intending to destroy a civilization. I don't think anyone goes out intending to take away someone's God.
I think they did 500 years ago.
I think the original people who were trying to create the infrastructure did, but then the people who got conditioned, who became missionaries, I think because that was the closest thing that they had to God, they were doing it out of wanting to share their version of the disco ball.
Yeah.
I have to believe that, so that because I'm just, I am an eternal optimist. So Ryan, as he got deeper into this Catholic missionary, missionary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So as he got deeper into this Catholic missionary's raison d'etre, why is she doing this work?
Yeah.
She said, well, if we want Jesus to come back, everyone will have to convert to Catholicism. And so Ryan said, oh, so what you actually want is everyone to agree with you. And when she got right down to it, she was like, yes, I need everyone to believe this one same thing so that Jesus can come back.
Yeah.
And he said, well, don't you think that Jesus is here? Christ consciousness itself, that's available to all of us right now.
Yeah.
And he said, well, how could Jesus come back if he's already here?
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought it was a fascinating conversation to kick off this whole priestess pilgrimage that we've been on.
Right. And, one of the most potent sayings to me of the Wiccan traditions, of the witchcraft traditions, is, hurt ye none, do what ye will. There is not a problem with anyone believing in Catholicism. The problem started when Catholicism went after other religions, when it started to shut down Eleusis. It shut down the temple at Delphi, right? It shut down the oracle. It said, you are not allowed to practice your path to God anymore. And that's where the toxicity comes in. So through this, right, we're in our own shadow journeys. And I'm really struggling in the car on the way to Delphi. And you helped me. And I think this is such a beautiful story of what high priestesses can do for each other, what sisterhood can be.
Oh, how did I help you? I don't remember.
You were like, do you want to talk about this? Because I'd sent these fiery text messages and I was struggling and I was just like, I need a moment.
Oh yeah, this is actually great because I totally forgot. So we go to lunch and I was like, would you like to clear some of this?
Yeah.
And you bravely said yes. It could have been easy to just be like, I'm fine, which is what most people do. We just deny our feelings. We've not been trained how to feel our feelings, but you bravely said yes. Yeah. And so over lunch, we moved into something that I call it's almost like speed therapy. It's a form of emotional alchemy, but I'd say that it is one way that I channel. It's one way that I can sort of jump into someone else's experience and ask a series of questions really quickly that help to peel away the emotional charge so that you can get to your own truth, so that you can get to the truth of that situation and then make decisions based on that. And so I totally forgot about that, but I think it's germane to this conversation because in helping each other and in feeling what is, one of the tools to help with that is in fact becoming a channel, becoming a mirror and letting someone know that they're not alone, right? That someone else can feel and see that experience, which helps us to move through it.
Yeah. And we actually got to Delphi, right? After this powerful journey at lunch that you facilitated. And you looked into my eyes and you were like, I'm here with you. Like, I'm fully here with you. And I told you, I was like, this insidious self-hatred that shows up as a rejection of my own beauty, as a telling my body that there's something wrong with it. I was like, it is a defense mechanism against the original pain that still lives in my belly, that is ancestral. Part of it's my mother's pain. Some of it is from the sexual abuse from my father. And I learned at a very young age, rather than feeling my own pain, I will distract myself with these defense mechanisms. It's a defense against my own pain to reject my body, right? And I've seen that so much in our society, that killing witches is gruesome, it's nasty, it's horrific. But if you really want to stop the witches, you teach them to hate and fear themselves, right? If we stop feeling for long enough and we get taught to hate ourselves, we can spend an entire lifetime fixating on that rather than feeling our own pain.
Yeah.
And I got to go down into the core of it and say, look, like there's this truth where I'm just still so fucking sad. Even after so much work, I'm still sad. It's so deep in my nervous system. And when I sit there, I feel whole. I feel fucking sad. I feel uncomfortable. But I also know my own beauty. I don't have to tell myself lies anymore to distract myself from this deep, epic well of pain. And so like through us and our connection and your wisdom, and you're right, like channeling in that process you took me through, I got whole. And I got whole through moving into my pain. Just accepting that that's what was there.
I want to really celebrate you for naming that, because I think so many people are stuck in some version of it, of fixing themselves, of trying to be something other than what they are, more beautiful, more feminine, more masculine, more straight, more gay, more young, more black, more white, like whatever the thing is, we're trying to be something other than exactly what we are.
Yeah.
And I'd never thought of that as a distraction mechanism from just feeling our fucking feelings.
Yeah.
And like the deeper in these spiritual rabbit holes that I go, and the more plant medicine and darkness cave retreats and having wild activations, like it doesn't matter how many sort of advanced experiences I have, it keeps coming back to the simplest of truths, which is to feel your feelings.
Yeah.
like that's really like the beginning and the end of this work, is learning how to feel your feelings. And it's one of the things that, interestingly, plant medicine almost renders you choiceless around.
Yeah.
You cannot run from them. You cannot hide from them. And I think that's when people have bad trips. It's like there's a backlog of intense emotions. They've had no training on how to feel or process them. And then you get hit with this like tsunami of it. And that can be really intense. So like, again, just a disclaimer that I don't want anyone to hear this podcast and then like run out and with no meditation, with no breath work, with no therapy, with no guidance, start facing that tsunami of unprocessed or unfelt feelings on their own. But if you do have other practices and facilitation and you're willing to feel your feelings, the amount of magic on the other side of that, the amount of beauty on the other side of that, the amount of eros on the other side of that is truly epic, which is a fun precursor to our next chapter after Delphi.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we can just come home to ourselves and say, like, you know what, I'm just fucking sad.
Yeah.
I'm just sad. I'm pissed off. And the simplicity of that. And yet how we spend so long trying to avoid that. And there's a little piece before we hop through Delphi and then into the cave of Pan is that, you know, people are like, Layla, why don't you teach more classical tantra, you know? Like you use all these advanced Sanskrit mantras. Like, why don't you teach that? Why don't you teach these like super advanced Kundalini practices? And I'm like, it doesn't matter to build all the spiritual power. In fact, it can be counterproductive. And to do all these advanced practices, you won't love yourself. If you can't feel your own body, you don't want to look at your pussy in a mirror. Where do you want to go? You know? And so to me, and I think this is a lost art sometimes, it's so easy to get entranced by these advanced, fancy, secret practices, by thinking we're going to get somewhere, by knowing some like secret practice, right? And both of us teach very entry level. You know, you teach meditation. Can you be with yourself twice a day? You know, be with what is twice a day, the power of that. And so much of what I teach is, can you be with your body? Can you be with your eros? Can you love yourself, every part of yourself? Because that is the foundation of anything and everything spiritual to me. And on top of that, we can go so high and so far and play in all the realms of spirituality. If we haven't done that, what is the point of building spiritual power on top of a dysregulated nervous system? Like, let's come home to ourselves first. It's so important. And so for me, the fact that we could be at Delphi, because then we went to Delphi, we take the mushrooms, we're basically just lying down on the ground. It's prickly. There's bugs. You're
so
like,
many bugs.
Oh my God. And you're just like, the bugs like lightly crawling over me, but also like you were like in a journey with the bugs, because it was real buggy. And I'm just like we both got rocks up our buttholes.
It was so humid. It was so earthy. And, you know, that sound, I did 5-MeO DMT one time, which is, it's like the cousin of ayahuasca, if you will. But it's basically like, forget about seeing the face of God. Like, you realize you are the face of God.
For sure.
Very directly on that medicine. And I remember as I was just coming out of it, there was this fly, like, zzz, and I was like, oh, like even in the actual heart of God, there's still a fly in the ointment. And it was a really healing moment for me, because I was like, there is no nirvana. Like, while we're still human, there is no absence of problems. There is no absence of conflict. Like, there's always going to be something. So how can we accept that, embrace that, and start having better and better problems? So thankfully I felt very like well equipped to handle our like buggy, hot, sick, breakup-y, ragey beginning of this journey. And then when you were like just having so much fun becoming one with the earth, I needed to move my body a bit. And so I get up and I start walking away, and I walk up towards this stadium, And fun fact, we've had many friends visit this place, and the fact that there's a stadium there and have been very public about wanting to have 80,000 people in a stadium climaxing at the same time, holding a dream for the species. Like I talk about it on every podcast.
God bless you.
I've ever been on. And the fact that our friends have been to this sacred feminine site where certainly there was ecstatic arts being practiced, and that there's a stadium there and none of them mentioned it. I was like, what? So anyway, I'm a little like I'm in my
very human moment. You were also kept falling.
I fell down like 3 times. Yeah. Hilarious and painful.
You were like, it's like I'm on drugs.
Oh, right, I am. So I'm going to the stadium, and right at this moment, this family is passing me. And there's a mother, a father, and 2 children. And I see the mother's face, and she is miserable. She just looks like repressed and angry and sad and silent. And then the father is reprimanding the daughter. The daughter's probably 3 or 4 years old. And all she's wanting to do is slide down the pebbles. Like the reason why I was sliding so much is that it was like slippery pebbles.
It was for sure slippery.
And so she was like having fun time, like running and sliding. She was like having a little ski sledding session. And the father was not having it. So again, here's this mirror of this like angry, repressive, patriarchal figure, like stamping down her fun and her play and her joy. And so he's picking her up, disallowing her from her own sovereignty. And she's like, he said, "Are you going to behave? Are you going to behave? If you behave, then I'll set you down. Are you going to behave?" And right as I walk past her, she goes, "No." He's like, "Are you going to behave?" She goes, "No." And I was just sending her so much love. And I was like, "Kid, you are so much braver than me." I would have said yes. I would have lied. I would have said whatever I needed to say to get out of there. And then I would have done it anyway. But she was so brave in her like defiance. She's like, "No, I'm not going to behave." And this man was just yelling at her for like 40 minutes as they walked away. And it was so upsetting to me because again, on the medicine, you're more open, you're more conscious, you're more sensitive. Yeah. And my father had, alcohol abuse issues. He had anger issues. He was manic depressive, bipolar, and he never really got the treatment or help that he needed. And so that was very triggering for me to like see an angry father like yelling at his daughter that way, and a mother who was shut down and scared. Like it was just so took me back into that original imprint in my body. And it felt like such a gift that nature would give me such an exact mirror of my childhood and an opportunity to love that little girl, an opportunity to love myself at that age and to truly like integrate that in front of this stadium, and remembering that likely that level of separation from myself at such an early age is why this work is so important to me, why this integration work is something that I do want to do inside of a stadium, because I really believe in the power of the collective antenna. And I really believe that if we can get tens of thousands of people remembering the religion that has no name, that their bodies are actually a portal to God, that we will change the timeline, that we will change the direction of the species, which right now does not look amazing.
No. So 2 things to that. So what was, because I heard the father too, and I was in the fetal position, basically thrashing around, dealing with my like inner child pain, my issues with my boyfriend, all of that. And like eventually I like got my ass up out of the dirt, and I'm like I've got so many briars in my hair, and I come and find you, and you were like, wow, like the daddy issues, that really make me want to like bring this work to like hundreds of thousands of people in a stadium. And like, the daddy issues that have you like crying in the fetal position in the ground. And I was like, getting hundreds of thousands of people to sexually activate a stadium is a better way to deal with daddy issues than crying in the fetal position on the ground. And then you looked at me in the eyes, and you're like holding onto this tree, and you were like, "You did pretty good with your daddy issues, Layla." And I was like, word, I didn't do too bad with my daddy issues and what I built out of it,
You've created a whole empire. You've initiated thousands and thousands of women into being their own version of high priestesses.
Yeah. I climbed my way out of a trauma hellhole. Yeah. And like I've shown so many people how to do the same. So like here's to, transmuting daddy issues and doing some pretty grand things as a result.
And one thing I think that's worth mentioning is that there isn't a newness to my remembering of being a witch. And so with that, there's an innocence of like, yes, let's do it in a stadium. Yes, let's talk about it on every podcast. Like, why would this offend anyone?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a beautiful transmission. And there is power in like being in a cave and the safety of that. And like the the intensity of the transmission that can come through when women are just with women and they feel fully safe in a womb-like space.
Yes.
So both are great.
Yeah.
And I think I want to highlight that because we've been so conditioned to think that there's a right way or that I should be different or I should be more like Layla or you should be more like Emily. Like no.
Yeah.
We were all made different. We're all facets of the divine.
And that is the transmission that I received at Delphi. It was live your destiny, right? So you have the Pythia breathing in these fumes from the earth, right? It was volcanic. They think nitrous oxide or some other compound that was making her high, right? And here's the thing that they kind of forget. These priestesses are doing sacred practices the rest of the year, developing themselves, developing their arts, developing their intuitive abilities. And a lot of them are older, they're mature in their wisdom and their power and their stance. And so they are channeling as these, Greek patriarchs come and ask, what should I do in the war? What should I do with the state treasury? These huge, big, important questions. And the transmission I was getting as I rolled around in the fucking brambles and dealt with my daddy issues and dealt with my boyfriend issues and dealt with the rocks up my butt and all of that. And you thought I was in heaven. I mean, I would say I was more peaceful than you in that situation, but it was still a struggle. I was like, how many ants have been up my skirt today? And in that, it was this live your destiny. There ain't nobody else like you. That's it. And even as I was struggling with my boyfriend, it was like, stop thinking about any other relationship. All that matters is that you live your truth, your destiny, your power, right? These big life questions, no one else has the answer, right? You can go and you get signs and symbols. You can get wise people to give you indications of where to go, but you just live your own destiny. No one else can live Emily's life. No one else can live Layla's life. No one else can live yours. And when you come home to that and own that destiny, there's such a power in it. And I feel like life goes 3D. It's like you can taste the magic of your own aliveness when you stop thinking that it was supposed to be some other way. Be like, no, it was supposed to be this way because this is what's happening.
Yes, it's meant because this is what is.
Yeah.
And then what is becomes the portal. And as you're saying this, I'm feeling like, oh, I wonder if there's a message here of becoming your own oracle.
Yeah.
Of being able to listen to your own divine guidance.
Yes. Yes. Because no one can ultimately tell you. It's like, stop trying to live someone else's relationship. All that matters is what's true for you. Yeah. Stop trying to live someone else's career. All that matters is what's true for you. Stop trying to live someone else's spiritual truth. All that matters is what's true for you. Right. And we can all inspire each other. We can all guide each other. But at the end of the day, it's your destiny, your oracle. So from there, we were like, okay, Delphi, kind of a wash, We took the mushrooms, we rolled around with some bugs, we examined our daddy issues.
Oh, we got another security guard right at the end.
Following us, yeah.
We were the last ones out, and you'll hear this in the other episode at Elucis. We really had the whole place to ourselves except for one security guard who was very much a part of our experience. But on this day, we were in our own journey until the very end. We're the last ones out, and the security guard is very, very close to us, like awkwardly, uncomfortably close. Yep. And finally, Layla's like, excuse me, can you please give us some space? We're walking out, but you
don't need to be up my ass right now.
I've had plenty of bugs up my ass. Do not need you. Plenty of rocks up there. Yeah. No more space. And then as we were leaving, I was like, hey, Layla, can you take a quick photo of me? And you were like, yeah, you haven't had any whistles blown at you today, because I had a whistle blown at me the day before, which is, again, part of the other episode.
For being too outrageously in her goddess energy. Yep.
And so Layla said, do you want to take off your shoes? So I take off my shoes. I come back. I start posing. And then out of nowhere, a
woman blows a whistle. A Greek woman guard.
A guard aggressively blowing the whistle. And we just start dying laughing because it felt like a real, we haven't really lived until we get a whistle blow.
So if you're watching this and you're like, I want to have sex like that. Honestly, I want to have sex like that too. All the time. Then I have made this incredible guide called Epic Sex. And what it does is it trains you in techniques and tools that you can use to have the 6 different types of sex. And so these are sensational sex, where you feel all activated and your feels are all there. Electric sex, where that chemistry is crackling and you can actually create that with tools like breath work and conscious touch. Wild sex, where you can actually train your nervous system to let go of inhibitions emotions or thinking too much or being in your head, and let go into your deep primal expression, which is so sexy to do with someone that you love. You learn tantric sex, which is how to activate your energy system, your chakras, and to be able to see the divine in your lover. Kinky sex, which trains you in how to create safe spaces so that you can explore edges and fantasies together. And enlightened sex, which teaches you all about masculine, feminine polarity dynamics, how to get into peak radiance and surrender or peak presence and containment. So if this is something that you want to explore, you can go ahead and get the guide. It's totally free. It's 77 pages. It is chock full of amazing trainings, and you can get it at laylamartin.com/epic sex. That's laylamartin.com/epic sex. I've also included that link inside the show notes so you can access it anytime.
Yo. All right. Pan's Cave.
Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go.
Let me give you the lowdown on Pan, which is when I was 15 years old, I read a book called Jitterbug Perfume. And this book articulated Pan was the god of wildness and hedonism and orgiastic abandon and eros, sexual desire, right? He was the embodiment of the natural world. Fucking because you want to fuck. Eating because you're hungry. Doing it because it feels good, right? This prototypical, like, do what the fuck you want as long as you don't hurt anyone else. And we lost that art. Do it because it feels good. Why not? Right? And so I read this book at 15. And what blew my mind open, there were two things. Number one, I was like, I'm a Maenad. So the Maenads were the high priestesses of Pan, of Dionysus, right? Pan and Dionysus, very, very linked. And they actually presided over the ecstatic rites of Dionysus. And Dionysus was not just the god of wine. So that's what he's known as. And I was always confused by this because I was like, yeah, wine, kind of toxic. Like, how am I so into the god of alcohol when, like, I loved alcohol when I was younger, but I haven't really drank since I was 21. Like, I barely drink. I was like, what? And then I'm reading The Immortality Key, and Brian's writing, he's like, Dionysus was not just the god of wine. He was the god of all plant medicine, including LSD, including magic mushrooms. And I was like, oh my God. Like, because I knew myself as a Maenad. I knew myself as a high priestess. Maenad? So a high priestess of Dionysus. Okay. So basically they were the high priestesses who gave the original sacraments of Dionysus, of this wild god. And what is amazing in the Greek Empire, which is very patriarchal, women often couldn't leave houses without a male an accomplice guarding over them. Just like the Greek guards on us in the temples, like so wild. And these high priestesses were given a level of freedom that very few other women were in the Greek Empire. And so they gave plant medicine, but what they would do is they would actually take plant medicine and they would run wild in the forests, and they would unify with Dionysus. They would literally become Dionysus, and they would make love to each other. And it was part of the way that they knew God, was this incredible ecstatic eros. And I knew that when I was 15. I was like, I don't know exactly what it means, but I know that I'm a Maenad.
I would like to just, I don't know if you're going here, but are you going to tell the story about Brian and Summit?
Oh, yes, I can. Okay. Great. So the other thing that I learned in Jitterbug Perfume is that Pan and the cult of Pan was one of the hardest for the Catholic Church to stamp out, because the Catholic Church went to war with these pagan traditions. And Dionysus, right? So Maenads are the high priestesses of Dionysus, who you could argue is Pan, but they're very, very linked as deities. And this was one of the hardest traditions to get rid of for the Catholic Church. Not to mention that there's some argument in the Immortality Key, probably goes a little deeper than everyone needs to know, where Jesus and the rites of Jesus were very similar to the rites of Dionysus. And so there was this deep desire from the Catholic Church to get rid of Dionysian rituals and worship. So they made the devil Pan. There is no devil in the Bible. There's Lucifer. There's the fallen angel. But the devil with hooves and horns, right? Why? was Pan. We even get the word horny from Pan, right? To be
'cause he was
erotically
goat, right? He's like
activated.
half goat, half man.
Yes. That's why the devil looks like a goat, not in the Bible. That was the Catholic Church taking the God of High Priestess, erotic activation, and primal wild rites and making him literally the devil.
I did not know that until 30 seconds before we walked into Pan's cave. And just thank you for studying this. Thank you for teaching me this, because that one fact, I think, is such a powerful microcosm of what the entirety of the book, the entirety of this pilgrimage is here to do, which is to help people to, with curiosity and love and open-heartedness, start to look at the conditioning that we've all been swimming in, the very things that we've been taught to think are satanic or evil or dangerous or bad for us. What if some of those are actually the way that we plug ourselves directly into the divine?
Yeah. That's why I teach sacred sexual practices, because it's been the most taboo, the most controlled, right? The most restricted of our connection to our own selves. And it is the superhighway to divine remembrance. And I want people to know that. And the Maenads knew that. The High Priestesses knew that. And they held ecstatic rituals and rites for people to tap in to their ecstatic erotic nature as a way to remember the divine, as a way to unify with God consciousness. So plant medicine and sacred sexuality activation, they go hand in hand of being these pillars of empowered sovereign remembrance.
And when you got to meet Brian at Summit, which is like a gathering of entrepreneurs and authors. And when he met you, he said, "Oh, you're a real life Maenad."
Yeah.
And I felt so happy for you.
They were like, "Layla, what would you do to make an LSD sacrament, in the ancient tradition?" And I was like, "Well, I'd have us fast and then take the sacrament and go into deep catharsis and then reclaim our erotic nature and then go into divine remembrance and then feast and celebration." And he was like, "You're a real Maenad. It's true. Not that I need a white man to tell me, but it still feels good."
It feels good to be seen.
It sure does.
And especially someone who's dedicated the past decade of his life to researching this.
Yeah.
Also someone who's never done plant medicine, who's not a woman.
Yeah.
Like the fact that he's been in that much service to this is a big deal. And so I'm glad you got seen.
And also I had zero hope that the heroes of our culture would ever be like, "You're a Maenad," with any level of excitement.
Yeah.
Because we got associated with the devil when all we were pillars of remembrance. That ecstasy can be a portal to divine remembrance. That running wild and naked through the forest, that taking plant medicine sacraments can open us to God. And people are probably like, "Isn't that dangerous?" And you're like, yeah. So do it with conscientiousness, do it with care, do it with initiation, do it with excellent guardians, do it with great therapists and coaches and teachers, right? To initiate you into it. But also, life is fucking dangerous.
Also,
This whole world is toxic and dangerous.
Not
So
feeling
why are
your
you so
feelings.
afraid of your own divine remembrance?
Yeah, conditioning, dangerous. Not feeling your feelings, dangerous. Eating chemicals in food, dangerous.
Yeah. Driving a car, dangerous.
Yeah.
But somehow we're so afraid of taking our clothes off and being in nature.
But I think people are starting to remember, like, get your grounding, is a thing now. Like, get in nature. Andrew Huberman, like, get sunshine in your eyeballs. Like, we're starting to slowly, because science is now verifying and validating what these people have been saying for thousands of years. We are starting to move back to the earth, to plant medicine, to our bodies.
So when I find out there's a cave of Pan, we're in the birthplace of Pan, I was like, we gotta go, right? You were like, yo, I'm along for the ride.
I'm in your hands. I trust you.
And so I spent days trying to talk to, the concierge at our hotel. And I was like, look, because I might have hiked it, but you were unwell. We might have hiked it. It's a long, long, long hike. And I was like, it takes a 4-wheel drive. It's a dirt road. It's hard to access. But like, I really need a driver that can get us there, a car that can get us there. So they put us in a Mercedes minivan and they were like, trust me, it can go. So we start going, right? And the driver's like, I don't know about this. And it wasn't like that dangerous. But what was amazing about the energy of it is as he approached the cave, right? And I kept being like, you can do this, man. You can do this. We were like, you're a hero. We're like cheering him on. Is that the word panic comes from Pan because it's this like, oh, like that energy, right? Like the tip of ecstasy where you could almost tip over into fear or you could tip over into ecstasy and aliveness. And so he started feeling like almost a panic fear.
He could stop the van. He's like, I can't go anymore. I can't go anymore. And then I'd be like, you've got this. Just go slow. We're cheering you on. You're a hero.
Yeah.
And then he would go a little bit further and he would stop again. And you could really feel that panic building in him. And the forest started getting kind of dark and Seussian, and the trees started taking on these weird shapes. And then I noticed, I was like, oh, my clothes are literally falling off. Yeah. And I was lounging because my back was kind of hurting. So next thing I know, I'm like half naked, like bouncing in the car. Our driver's panicking. And I was like, oh, I can feel this Pan energy. I did not know much about Pan, but I can feel what's happening in my body. This is wild.
Yes, it was like tasting and like, this is like the Eros, right? It was like starting to come over us and we were like starting to look at each other like on the journey and get like more and more activated. And like, you're sick as fuck. Like I'm going through boyfriend issues and inner child misery. And it was like, it don't matter anymore.
Yeah, Pan's got us now.
Pan's got us now. So we get out of the car. We finally arrived. The driver's like so happy. He now feels like a hero. We encouraged him. It wasn't that dangerous. It was literally just a dirt road up a mountain. And, we hike a little bit up to the entrance of the cave, right? It's sunset. It's super magical. We go in to like the cave to end all caves.
Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen a cave. I thought I had seen caves.
Yeah.
I knew CAVE, cave, hole into the earth. I didn't know cave.
Yeah.
Until I saw this cave. It was like the perfect opening. It's just stalactites and stalagmites, and they've been softened and sharpened for eons, it seems. And so there's like nothing for the mind to really make sense of. And so it really catapulted me into this everythingness. And the moments that I loved where we were like 50-50 riding the line between hotness and hilarity. We were laughing so hard and simultaneously outrageously erotically charged, and feeling the profundity of the like our antennas merging and like snakes catapulting all the way down beyond the core of the planet, like deeper even. And then like the galactic universes that opened up like deeper and higher simultaneously in all directions. And the almostness of the orgasm was wild and beautiful. And I'm so glad that we prayed. I'm so glad that in our final prayer saying thank you to the cave that we that we just took a moment to remember our dreams for the planet and for our loves and for ourselves and for our missions. From that space of just like cosmic cave, infinite intertwining. And it was interesting, the relationship to safety. Like when you felt safe, when I felt safe, what made us feel safe? For me, it was the silence and the stillness when I felt like we were truly alone. Like then I felt very safe. But if I felt like there was people coming or people leaving, or I thought people coming or people leaving, like my nervous system didn't really feel safe. It's like feeling the power of a cave, of like, especially if you had a guardian, you know, that you could just really, like, for maybe the only place in nature ever really fully surrender. I felt us go into birthing energy, like orgasmic birthing energy together. I loved us seeing the different, like looking at clouds when you're a little kid. It's like we would look at the cave and watch it change shapes, change dimensions, and share what we were seeing with each other through the cave walls.
Yeah. And so we at first went into this like catharsis of just letting energy move through our bodies. And as you said, it felt like we were kind of shaking off the shadow of the day, the remaining shutdown, also just having to be around other people that weren't on the wavelength.
The guards, the whistles, the driver.
Yeah.
It was just really transmuted that. We just started sounding and shaking. And it happened we weren't like, oh, let's do a catharsis ceremony. Like it just started happening. We started doing it innocently and spontaneously.
I got down on all fours. I was in the dirt.
And just slippery mud.
It felt like for me, it's like, oh, I'm home. This is my home.
I asked you as soon as we got, I said, how do you feel? And you said, home, with this sweetness of like a little girl coming to her home for the first time.
Yeah. And then I asked you if you wanted to sit in Yab Yum. And I think it's important to share that like you and I have connected erotically before. And there was this step of fully making love to each other that actually you had invited me into. And there was some story in me of like, am I blocked? Why haven't we done this all the way? There's this magic between us, this eros between us. And we've simultaneously been best friends, and we made out within probably 36 hours of meeting each other. We've always had this like eros is part and parcel of our deep friendship and a beautiful part of the expression with each other, but we never like fully made love with each other. And I was a little like, oh, am I in avoidance? Am I blocked? Right. And I asked you, I was like, do you want to sit in Yab Yum? And so we got into the position of you sitting on my lap, and we're like almost in pitch dark. Like we can see each other. We can see each other's eyes, but it's very dark, right? And the sun is going down. We're in the mud. The cave is dripping on us. And like our pussies touch, and we go into this like epic energy activation. Like it was so wild.
And I think it's of note that even though we hadn't fully like consummated our relationship, every time we've ever connected in an erotic way, like if we're at a party and the moment that we really lock into each other's energy, like the whole party catches on fire. Like the whole party lights up. Everyone in the room gets activated. There really is a special alchemy with our transmissions. And when we unify our antenna, like there's a very large amount and very special flavored magic that happens. And so like when that started happening inside of the cave, I was so excited for you, Layla, for me, Emily, for our 3D experience, but also very curious of like, oh, what is about to happen to the planet? Maybe that's really narcissistic, but it felt that big.
Yeah.
It felt like that sacred of a site.
Yeah.
And that big of a reunion.
Yeah. Yeah. And why not hold that much bigness for any two women making love that like Alexander the Great could be like, yes, I changed destiny, right? Like the Fortune 500 CEOs can be like, I changed destiny. Why can two women making love to each other not change destiny?
Yes. I mean, I feel like it did.
Yeah.
In the reclamation that happened there, in us talking about it. I mean, this is the first time I've ever really publicly spoken about making love to women or being bisexual. And so it feels like its own coming out at, 44 years old. Hi, Mom.
For real.
And so it feels exciting and a little scary. And I want to say thank you so much for your love and for your trust and for the way that you see me. And for the tenderness and joy and wildness that you embody all simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's really a beautiful gift.
Yeah. And it was lovemaking to me in the spirit of Pan, which is the spirit of truth, and that it was wild. It was primal. It was muddy, right? I still have dirt under my fingernails. It was the cave dripping down on us. It was erotically alive, right? It was so embodied, and it was electrically energetic. It was potent. It was transformative. It was divine and hot at the same time. It was human and raw and primal and so sacred all at the same time.
Hot
so
and
living, so
holy.
raw. Yeah, it was very hot and holy.
And speaking of rocks of the butt, I'm pretty sure I did have like a rock stimulating my anus while we were making love.
Nature's butt plug.
Nature's butt plug. That's right. And I think it's of note that when we first started, like I'm really a fan of the almost. Like I'm very physically sensitive. So usually if I'm with a lover for the first time, I have to like softer, slower, gentler, less, because it's the anticipation and the almost that really builds the eros in me. And so, before we ever really even made contact, it was like I was penetrating your heart. You were penetrating my womb, but it was happening energetically.
Yeah.
And the thing I want to highlight about that is because, again, this type of work is rather new for me. And it feels so profound, the ability to experience an energy cock, that I could inhabit my own masculine energy and actually physically penetrate someone on the energetic plane is a big deal. For me, it feels so new and very potent. And my theory, my hypothesis is that if more people could experience their energetic bodies and maybe the opposite of whatever they identify as. So if you identify as female, you inhabiting your energetic masculine, and conversely, if you identify as male, inhabiting your energetic feminine, my hypothesis is that we would really go a long way in dismantling misogyny and homophobia and transphobia, because if you see that you are all of those things too, then it's very hard to other. And one of the people who I think articulates this with such beauty and power is Alok. They are transgender. Actually, I don't know if that's true. They are non-binary.
Yeah.
So Alok, they are non-binary. And the way that they speak about this is so captivating. They were on a podcast once and the host said, "I'm sorry I haven't done more to protect trans people." And Alok said, "We do not need protection. We do not need to be protected. We are so holy, so much closer to the divine, because you cannot gender God." And so as we all evolve and go into higher states of consciousness, by default, we start to inhabit our masculine and our feminine. And so I just love the way that they really took a stand for and celebrated the only thing that you need to protect is your own hatred of those parts of yourself. That is the only reason that anyone attacks trans people, is because they are afraid of those parts of themselves, the pieces that they have shamed inside of themselves, which goes back to the original argument of why we even went on this pilgrimage, because there has been a very active campaign to make us forget our own divinity, to make us think that plant medicine is the devil or that sex is sinful. And so this reclamation feels like, yes, sovereignty inducing and holy in our own individual evolution, but also the ramifications and the ripple effect of what can happen societally when we start to see the everything inside of us is very, very important medicine at this moment in history.
And I remember one moment that I want to take us all to, where we are just like deep in the eros, deep in the lovemaking, deep in the intimacy. And I was like, was I blocked? Or were we just waiting for the perfect moment? As the cave like drips into my mouth and we're like,
oh, so good.
I also, in a moment of like deep reclamation, was like so happy to make out with you while you were sick. I was like, because you were like, how do you feel about that? And I was like, look, if I get to make love to you and all that happens is I get a gnarly ass cold, I'm still one of the most blessed people on the planet.
I mean, God bless your bravery. Thank you for being willing to make out with me, even while I was hawking up a lung. And I do think that, part of any of the work that we do is knowing timing.
Yeah.
And I do think you're right. We were waiting for the right place and the right time.
Yeah.
Wow. So beautiful.
And so, I just want to finish by saying, part of the High Priestess work is to embrace the shadow. And if we hadn't been able to ride the waves of challenge at Delphi, I don't know that we could have made it to the Cave of Pan. And that going through those challenging pieces without carrying too heavy of a story, without letting it color the next moment. It's like, okay, this moment was shadow. This moment was challenge. This moment was pain. This moment was trauma. Whoo, next moment. Hey, look, time to take our clothes off. And not in a bypassy way, in a being with the moment as the moment is there, but then not letting it turn into this story of what the next moment has to be, because the next moment is always a mystery. Yeah, I really felt that.
Yeah, you named it. You said, who knows what the next part of the adventure is going to be. And almost every plant medicine journey has some layer of that.
Yeah.
There's some portal that you need to go through. Almost every lovemaking session, there's some portal. Like, I'm tired, I smell, I think my cellulite is ugly. Like, there's something that you have to move through to really fully open to the full magic.
Yeah.
And that day was such a perfect illustration of it. And also, we had prepared ourselves by going to Eleusis 2 days prior, because the whole point of Eleusis is to die before you die.
Yeah.
It's like going through the death portal takes you to heaven, as it were.
Yeah.
But the heaven is not some place that you transcend from. It is not some place that you escape your body to get to or wait until the afterlife to experience. Heaven is right here inside of our bodies. It is right now. It is only ever inside of us, and it is only ever right now.
All right. So we're going to have episodes 3 and 4 for you in this series. Episode 3 is going to be, or part 3 maybe is a better way to put it. Part 3 is going to be on Emily's podcast, Why Isn't Everyone Doing This? Part 4 will be here on this Tantric life. And we don't know what's going to happen yet, because we're here in Crete and our adventure is tomorrow.
Woo!
We're going to download the Cretan codes and get in touch with this Minoan ancient magic. We'll be here to serve you up some incredible stories from whatever that brings. And Emily Fletcher, please follow her. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about what you can do with her, how you can work with her as a teacher. And what is so beautiful to me is she teaches meditation, right? One of the most blissful, profound, life-changing forms of meditation. Changed my life as a meditator. And you can feel who she is, right? Meditation makes her more alive, makes her more erotically activated, makes her a better mother. She's a meditation teacher that, to me, is like divinity embodied in this electric feminine way. And she's growing into as well, teaching on sexuality, teachings on partnership. She has an amazing partnership with such a king, right? And so I highly recommend that you follow her, that you get into Ziva meditation, which has personally transformed my life in relationship to meditation, and do anything else that she does.
Thank you so much. I love you. Okay, so yes, you can follow me at Ziva Meditation, also at Emily Stella Fletcher. I've got 2 Instagrams. And then zivameditation.com/podcast will be an awesome free masterclass where you can learn about the neuroscience of this specific lineage that I teach, of this style of meditation that I've done every day, twice a day for 16 years, that I taught to Layla and to Lama and Aubrey and so many of our amazing friends who said, I didn't ever commit to meditation until I learned Ziva. I didn't have a daily practice until I learned this style. So if you've ever thought that you were a bad meditator, if you've ever been frustrated because you can't quiet your mind, if you've ever just been like, I don't get why everyone likes meditation, please watch this free masterclass. It is going to dispel so many myths and help you feel like you actually can do it in a way that's going to help you reclaim more of your magic. So that's zivameditation.com/podcast.
Yeah. Follow me over on Instagram at the Layla Martin, and you can make sure that you never miss a single teaching from me, episode from me, piece of content from me by heading over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address, and I'll teach you all kinds of things like sex magic and High Priestess practices. We will see you for the next episode over on Emily Fletcher's podcast. Mwah!
Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at the Layla Martin. And thank you so much for being here.